What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Giants. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, and today, taking an early look at training camp. Now, if you guys didn't see it, the New York Giants did announce their training camp schedule and dates today. Obviously, the tickets are typically free for training camp. The New York Giants just make them available to the public, first come, first serve, and those will be going on sale in the coming days. We did post the training camp schedule on Fireside Giants, and I'm going to go ahead and read that off for you guys in case you didn't see it before we dive into the main topic of conversation for today's episode. So tickets are going to be available for season ticket members on July 8th at 2 p.m. and then available to the general public July 10th at 2 p.m. And they will kick off training camp on Wednesday, July 23rd, and it carries through August the 13th. Now, I know that only some of those dates are open to the public, and I believe it's the 23rd, 24th, 25th, 27th, 28th, 29th, 30th, 1st and 2nd of August, 4th of August, and 13th of August. Those are going to be the dates where you can attend New York Giants schedules. And obviously, the schedule or New York Giants practices. The schedule is subject to change, of course, with any inclement weather or whatever, but yeah, I just wanted to give you guys the update on that. Giants officially did drop their practice schedule for training camp next month, kicking off on July 23rd. But at training camp, we know position battles, roster battles, preseason games, roster cuts, and dwindling down 90 men to 53 final man roster. And that's what we're going to talk about. Who are some of these players that could be on the roster bubble going into training camp next month? Maybe they're players that you've thought of. Oh, maybe this guy's going to get cut. Maybe it's a player that you haven't thought of quite yet. A player that showed promise a couple of years ago who has fallen out of favor with the coaching staff. Those are the things that we're going to discuss in today's episode. So let's strap in. Not going to be any intense background music and sunglasses today, but maybe tomorrow or in the coming days. Also on the horizon, have a great interview with Brian Walker, Defensive Backs Academy, coming out on the channel in the coming days. So make sure you do stay tuned for that as well, and some collaborations with some great Giants content creators. All right, let's waste no more time. First player that I want to talk about is Graham Gano. Now, this one could surprise some Giants fans, but I do think most of you know where I'm going with this. Graham Gano over the last couple of years has not been healthy enough. The best ability is availability, right? I know that that's become a catchphrase for certain fans of the channel. The best ability is availability, and when you're looking at Graham Gano, he just hasn't been available enough over the last two seasons. Last year in particular, he got injured pretty early on in the year, tried to come back from it, wasn't the same, and then ultimately wound up having a season cut short. The Giants need stability at the kicker position. Last year, having a bit of a revolving door, having new guys come in and out of the lineup, without that stability, you're not going to have a strong special teams scoring ability. So I think it's really important that the Giants at least bring in some competition for Graham Gano this offseason. Currently, they have Gano and they have Jude McAdamney on the roster. Now, the new special teams coordinator that the Giants hired this offseason, Mike Gobriel, did kind of indicate at mandatory minicamp, or at OTAs rather, that there would be an open competition this summer, that he would not rule out Jude McAdamney becoming the starting kicker for the New York Giants. But my take on it, not only should the Giants have Graham Gano and McAdamney, who's been a practice squad kicker for the Giants for the last 2 years, if you're not familiar with him, through the international program, the Pathway program. He's coming, I believe, he's Scottish. Not only should they have McAdamney competing with Graham Gano, but personally, I think they should add another veteran to the mix, a guy with some more playing time experience at the professional level, because McAdamney played in one game last year for the Giants, made one field goal from 31 yards out, doesn't have actual tried and true experience at the NFL level just yet. Now, that's not to discount him or say that he's not capable of being a good kicker in the NFL. Of course, I think that it's possible, and that's why I'm advocating for this being an open competition between these two guys. But I would also like to see the New York Giants add a third body to the mix, get another kicker in there, somebody with a little bit more experience who might still be available in free agency. Just because Graham Gano, listen, 3 seasons ago, I mean, he was arguably the most important player on the New York Giants, or at least one of the most important players. He put up a lot of points, especially in that 2022 season where the Giants did go to the playoffs, performed really well, kicked from deep, kicked with efficiency and with accuracy, all of those great things. He was one of the best kickers in the NFL, but then injuries since then have gotten in the way. And I think he's 36 years old. Plus, if the Giants do want to release him this summer, they can save quite a bit of money against the cap. In fact, they can save $4.4 million in cap space. That might not sound like game-changing money, but when you as a team only have $3.8 million in salary cap space, adding another $4.4 million to the mix could be rather significant, especially when you're talking about a team that has dealt with a lot of injuries in recent seasons. You need a little bit of insurance money. What if it's week 5 and you have an injury at a key position? Now you got to put somebody on injured reserve and you got to sign a backup to step in and play for the rest of the year. You need to have a little bit of money set aside for any of those nightmare scenarios. And the Giants don't have enough right now at $3.8 million. Most teams want to be comfortable going into the regular season and have about $10 million in cap space. So releasing a player like Gano could get them really close to that 10 million comfortable threshold. And again, if Graham Gano looks phenomenal during training camp, knocks in every single field goal, is automatic from 60 yards out, you're not going to release him. But if he does struggle this summer, I think that he could end up getting released in favor of a younger and healthier kicker like McAdam or somebody else. So let's keep an eye on that. Again, this is not cut candidates. This is not players that I think will be released, anything like that. This is just roster bubble players who could find themselves on the outs if they don't win their position battles during the summer of practices. Now, a player who, if you asked me a month and a half ago, would have been on this list, who isn't anymore, is Cordell Flott. Cordell Flott would have been in the topic of conversation here because the Giants can save some money if they release him. And also, he's had his struggles in the past and he's entering his final year of his deal. However, he performed quite well during OTAs and mandatory minicamp, and in fact was taking reps with the starters in the first team as the CB2. So Cordell Flott, just wanted to give a shout out to him. He's not going to be on this list, although he originally, if I did this episode 2 months ago, would have been. So I wanted to give him a shout out for that. But staying or flipping over to the defensive side of the ball, staying on the defensive side of the ball, let's talk about the trenches. The Giants have been building over the past few years kind of a stable of young interior defensive linemen. And one of them who caught a lot of Giants fans' eyes a few seasons ago was former 7th-round pick Jordan Riley out of Oregon. I believe he was a 7th-round pick in 2023, if I'm not mistaken. It could have been, 2023. He came onto the scene in preseason and looked tremendous. But for some reason, just never really got any regular season playing time. There were a couple moments where he got on the field, had some flash plays with some tackles for loss, but ultimately graded out very poorly with PFF and fell out of favor last season in particular as some other guys like UDFA Elijah Chapman stepped onto the team and made more of a significant impact. So now I do think Jordan Riley, he's still with the New York Giants, but that's a player that I also think is on the roster bubble. And I bring him up because I know at one time Giants fans were really excited about Jordan Riley, myself included. He did have some very standout practice moments and some standout moments in the preseason a couple years ago. So Jordan Riley is one of those guys that I think has a lot to gain and everything to lose during training camp. But if he can outperform the likes of an Elijah Chapman or some of these other young guys that the Giants have on the interior, well, as a former 7th-round pick, he's cheap. Maybe he's got upside. Maybe he could stick around, but he's definitely a player that I identify as being on the roster bubble. And flipping over to the offensive side of the ball, let's talk about the guy who's in the thumbnail and who's on the graphic. That is Daniel Bellinger. And it pains me to say that Daniel Bellinger finds himself on the roster bubble. 2022, Daniel Bellinger was a good player for the New York Giants. I mean, as a rookie, as a 3rd-round pick, rather quickly placed himself into the starting lineup behind his good performances. And then he had the orbital injury, basically fractured his eye socket against the Jacksonville Jaguars. It was a very unfortunate moment and super unlucky injury and just bad break for Daniel Bellinger, who was really hitting his stride before that injury. That moment absolutely sucked in his rookie season, and it really derailed things for Daniel Bellinger because going into 2023, with him coming off of an injury that slowed down the second half of his year, Giants decided, let's go ahead and get a weapon for Daniel Jones, and they traded for Darren Waller, who after one season decided to retire and become a rapper instead. So that really worked out. But as a result, Daniel Bellinger was cast to the side. Darren Waller comes in as the starter. Daniel Bellinger is now tight end 2. When Darren Waller was hurt, Daniel Bellinger really didn't get the target share that he had as a rookie. He wasn't really implemented into the game plan the same way that he was in the season prior. And then we go into the 3rd season of Bellinger's career, 2024. What happens? The Giants bring in another replacement, this time not bringing in somebody to replace Bellinger, so to speak, but to replace Darren Waller, trying to emulate him with Theo Johnson, who's the more athletic, big 6'8" receiving threat from the tight end position. Very early on in his career, similar to what Bellinger did in 2022, Johnson last year established himself as the rookie starting tight end for the New York Giants. And now the Giants are thrilled about Theo Johnson. They love what they have in Theo Johnson. They can't stop talking about how excited they are in Theo Johnson. And honestly, I'm pretty excited for him too. Don't get me wrong. No way, shape, or form am I trying to discount Theo Johnson. I think he's going to be a good starting tight end for the New York Giants, truly. But it is going to come at the expense of Daniel Bellinger. And the reason why Daniel Bellinger doesn't just find himself on the starting lineup bubble and instead finds himself on the roster bubble is a point similar to the one we made about Graham Gano, and that point is going to come down to money. At the end of the day, the NFL is a business, and it's unfortunate to say, but the New York Giants releasing Daniel Bellinger would save them $3.4 million against the cap. And what that means, to boil it down to brass tacks, is their backup tight end Bellinger is their highest paid tight end on the roster. There is a clear discrepancy there. The tight end 2 shouldn't be getting paid significantly more than every other tight end on the roster, and he's not even making a ton. He's a former third-round pick, so he just finds himself in a tricky and unfortunate situation. Because like I said, Bellinger, he had 3 touchdowns as a rookie. He had a bunch of yards and a bunch of big plays. I think we all remember the rushing touchdown he had against Green Bay. Was a good player who flashed something in the first season of his career, but just hasn't been able to become a mainstay in the lineup since then, and has largely been phased out of the offense over the last 2 years. So now you look at this depth chart, the Giants have Greg Dulcich, a veteran who they signed this past offseason, who could arguably be more effective for his cost and price tag than Daniel Bellinger could be. And they also have Chris Manhertz, who's cheaper than Daniel Bellinger, but had comparable stats to him last season, or at least had a few good plays, and the Giants seem to like him better as a blocker as well. So, and I didn't even mention 7th-round pick this year, Thomas Fidone, really talented tight ends coming out of Nebraska, only went in the 7th round because he has an extensive injury history, but for pound talent, he's a really good player. So all of a sudden, the tight end room has become really crowded. Daniel Bellinger's not the starter, doesn't really have a chance of becoming the starter. And so even though he is still a good player in my eyes and probably in the eyes of the Giants, because he's not the cheapest option and the Giants have cheaper options, it's a negligible difference going probably from Daniel Bellinger to a Greg Dulcich in the mindset of Joe Schoen, who has to find ways to free up a little bit of cap space here. So again, this is not cut candidate. This is not me predicting that Bellinger gets released. This is just explaining why he's on the bubble. And that's why training camp is so crucial. If he performs well this summer, he really balls out, maybe even outperforms Theo Johnson in some ways this upcoming summer, he'll find his way back into the favor of the coaching staff. He will be on the roster. Bellinger is a good player, and he will find a home with another team if he is released by the Giants. But just as a result of the crowded tight end room that the Giants now have, keep an eye on him as a player who needs to ball out this summer, because unfortunately, Daniel Bellinger does now find himself on the roster bubble. And one last player that I want to touch on here, also on the offensive side of the ball, another player from that 2022 draft class who just hasn't developed into the player that the Giants wanted him to, a fellow 3rd-round pick, just like Bellinger, Josh Ezeudu. Obviously, the Giants drafted him out of UNC. He got a good amount of playing time as a rookie. He got a good amount of playing time. Honestly, he's had a great amount of playing time in each season of his career, just as a result of injuries to the Giants' offensive line. But this offseason, the Giants have really crowded the backup offensive line group. So whereas last year, Josh Ezeudu was in pole position to be the backup left guard / backup left tackle with the second team, now they've got James Hudson III, who's going to compete for that backup left tackle job. They have Stone Forsythe, who can compete for backup left tackle and right tackle. And they have Evan Neal. Neal. They have him competing now as the backup left guard. So they've all of a sudden crowded this room, and you've got a guy like Ezeudu who has gotten playing time, but has not developed with any of that playing time, has not become the player that the Giants can feel comfortable putting on the field. Honestly, hate to say it, he's been a liability when he has been on the field. So for the Giants, it would make sense if they're looking to move on from Ezeudu, considering how much talent they did add behind him. And releasing Josh Ezeudu would save the New York Giants $1.4 million in salary cap space, which, no, that's not a ton, but it's enough to move the needle when you compare that to some of these other guys that are on the roster who could potentially provide more from a backup offensive lineman standpoint. Like Stone Forsythe is an even cheaper option that the Giants do have. Aaron Stinney is a cheaper option as well. Forgot to mention him as one of the interior offensive linemen that the Giants seem to be pretty high on as a potential backup. So just now a crowded backup room. And this is a good thing. I'll highlight that by saying this is definitely a good thing that the Giants are now weighing their options with their backup offensive linemen. Whereas last year, they were kind of pigeonholed into going with Josh Azedu, kind of forced to roll with Josh Azedu as their backup left tackle because they didn't do enough to upgrade that position. Now they did do something. I don't know if it's enough, but they did do something. They brought in some veteran talents. And so there is some competition here in the backup offensive line group, which is a good, important, positive thing. So let's see again. If Josh Azedu looks like a new and improved player during the preseason, dominates, then hey, he'll absolutely be able to keep that roster spot. But he is definitely one of those players that I see on the bubble for the New York Giants. But those are the 4 players that I wanted to highlight in today's episode. Just a quick hitter for you guys. We're going to have, again, some interviews coming up and some collaboration episodes that are much longer. So definitely stay tuned. We're going to have more full episodes coming out in the coming days, probably a live stream as well in the coming days. So stay tuned to all of that. And also a big channel announcement coming soon. So make sure that you do turn on your notification bells and stay tuned for that channel announcement. But once again, guys, thanks so much for tuning in. Make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, ring the bell so you don't miss an episode, comment your thoughts down below. Hey, if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, make sure to leave us a 5-star review. Go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. Without further ado, I'll catch you on the next one. Have a good one, and let's go New York Giants.
Perfect.